After two deadly shootings by ICE agents conducting vehicle stops in the last week, the Department of Homeland Security announced today that it is halting most vehicle stops for immigration operations. Johann Sebastian Guerrero was shot and killed during a traffic stop by ICE officers yesterday in Biddeford, Maine. 1 week ago, Lorenzo Salgado Araujo was shot and killed during a traffic stop by ICE officers in Houston, Texas. According to elected officials briefed by DHS, neither man was actually the intended target of an arrest warrant. In both cases, DHS initially suggested that the driver weaponized their vehicle against ICE agents. Before that, narrative was changed or contradicted by witnesses and video. Angus King, the independent senator from Maine, appeared on this network this morning.
They shouldn't have been there at all, and there appears to be very little, if any, justification for this. I'm going to wait for the facts, but thus far, it stinks.
A law enforcement source who spoke to MS Now on condition of anonymity shared more details. ICE's low-level immigration vehicle stops have been paused as the agency reviews its policy. High-level offenders, national security threats, or violent offenders are still subject to traffic stops based on probable cause or a warrant. Tom Homan, President Trump's border czar, insists the halt is not a policy change, but is a temporary pause. Joining me now to discuss is Paul Butler. He is a former federal prosecutor, professor at Georgetown School of Law, and an MS Now legal analyst. So, Paul, my basic question to you is, why are all of these stops turning deadly? Is this a problem related to the actual policy, to training, to officers not following the policy? Why does this keep happening?
All of the above, Catherine. So ICE in the last year has hired about 8,000 new officers. Many of them have had this quickie training, just a few weeks. That was reversed after the deaths of in Minnesota. But they're still woefully insufficient in areas like de-escalation, traffic stops, and use of force. Add that to this quota from the Trump administration of 2,000 arrests a day. And so you have these untrained officers walking the streets with guns and a mandate to arrest everybody they can. It's a recipe for the kind of tragedy that we saw in Minnesota, in Maine this week, in Texas last week, in Minnesota a couple weeks ago, and so forth.
So what are law enforcement officers, like ICE officers, supposed to be doing if there's somebody in a car who maybe they think, and in this case, obviously, that what we know now is the two men who were killed were not actually the target of operations, but maybe if you're an ICE officer and you think you see someone who is the target for an arrest warrant, what are the protocols?
So first of all, if you do stop someone in a car and that person tries to get away, you don't shoot them. In Los Angeles, the police policy is if you think that someone in a car is about to run you down, you get out the way. You only shoot if it's a last resort, if it's the only way to save a life. But what ICE is doing in these cases is stopping suspects on their way to work, or they're dropping their kids off at school. It's usually unmarked vehicles. So the situation is somebody gets stopped by a van. These people jump out of the van and start screaming things at them. Not surprisingly, the data tells us that that makes people panic and more likely to flee, and thus these tragedies.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that instinct if you think of a bunch of masked people who don't have warrants or are not otherwise evidently law enforcement are coming after you. Yesterday, I spoke with Harris County District Attorney Sean Teare, Harris County, Texas, who said that this ICE crackdown is making it harder to fight real crime, that basically immigrants are less likely to cooperate with law enforcement. They're less likely to report crimes that they are either themselves the victims of or that they are witnesses to because they're worried about their immigration status being used against them. How does all of that square with the rhetoric around public safety, around Donald Trump embarking on these immigration raids to keep the public safe?
So there's no question that these tactics by ICE are making everybody less safe. It's not just the almost 20 people who have been fired upon or the 12 people who have been killed by ICE officers in the last year, including 3 American citizens. It's also, as you know, when people don't trust law enforcement, that makes everybody less safe. If you're an undocumented worker and you're being abused by somebody or you suspect someone committed a crime, you're not going to want to cooperate with law enforcement if you think that they're going to lock you up. Mr. Guerrero, who was killed this week in Maine, he was a DoorDash driver. He was supporting his family. He was not a threat to anybody. And so if the idea is that they're getting hardened criminals off the street, you can't do that if the goal is to arrest 2,000 people to facilitate this campaign of mass deportation. You're inevitably arresting very low-risk people who are basically law-abiding citizens. And again, they meet this situation where they panic sometimes, and you get these tragic results.
Yeah, and in the case of Mr. Guerrero in Maine, Mr. Araujo in Maine, that gentleman apparently, according to immigrant rights groups, had some kind of work permit and had a Social Security number. You know, we'll have to wait to see what all of the reporting bears out. But not only not a criminal risk, but potentially authorized to be here.
Yeah, and when we think about the criminal risk, you know, the FBI used to investigate federal shootings, but in Minnesota, we saw that they were more interested in prosecuting the victims or the victims' families or Democratic politicians than the officers who actually killed Renee Good and Alex Preddy.